Giordano Bruno was born in 1548 in the small town of Nola in southern Italy, at a time when free thought still crawled under the shadow of ecclesiastical authority. From an early age, his untamed spirit led him to the Dominican convent, where he immersed himself in theology, philosophy, and astronomy. But Bruno did not yield easily. He questioned sacred images, rejected dogmas, and embraced ideas deemed dangerous. His nonconformity soon placed him in the crosshairs of the Inquisition. He realized that the cloister would never contain the vastness of his mind, and so he fled. He then began a long exile, wandering across Europe, from Geneva to Paris, from London to Frankfurt, spreading his ideas, gathering enemies and admirers alike. He gained fame as a fierce polemicist, but his intellectual audacity, coupled with his disdain for religious authorities, made him intolerable to both Catholics and Protestants. In 1592, he was betrayed in Venice and handed over to the Roman Inquisition. He endured years of interrogations and attempts at forced conversion. He never surrendered. In 1600, he was sentenced to be burned at the stake. Before the judges, he declared, "Perhaps you pronounce this sentence with greater fear than I receive it." Bruno's most explosive idea was his vision of an infinite universe. While the Copernican model had already dethroned the Earth as the center of the cosmos, Bruno went even further. To him, the sun was not the center either, because the universe had no center at all. There existed countless suns, countless worlds, orbiting their own stars, just as we see the planets do in our own system. He wrote of this boundless cosmos in Dell'infinito, Universo e Mondi. Creation, he believed, had no end, no borders, an unbearable idea for the Church, which still saw humanity as the axis of creation and Earth as the divine stage. If the universe were infinite, man was no longer the protagonist of the cosmic drama. We would be but one of many forms of life scattered across space. Bruno's heresy was not merely astronomical, it was spiritual. By breaking down the walls of a closed cosmos, he also shattered the boundaries of Christian doctrine. For him, the infinite universe was the reflection of an equally limitless mind. Bruno accepted no absolute truths nor closed systems that claimed to capture the totality of reality. To him, knowledge was a continuous expansion, an endless process, mirroring the ever-moving universe itself. There were no eternal dogmas, no final point. His thought waged direct war against the notion that wisdom could be static or immutable. Bruno saw the human mind as a mirror of nature, vast, alive, and free. His defense of freedom of thought put him at odds with every system that sought to tame the intellect. In his philosophy, God and nature were not separate. He rejected the Christian image of a distant and indifferent creator. Instead, he embraced a radical pantheism. God was in everything, in fire, in stone, in the stars, in the mind, pulsing in every particle of existence. God is infinite, and being infinite, he cannot be smaller than the universe itself. Therefore, the universe must also be infinite. In Cause, Principle, and Unity, Giordano Bruno asserted that there is no creator separate from creation. God and the universe are not two distinct realities, but one single essence. God is the all, present in every form, in every particle, in every breath of existence. This vision, which would later influence Spinoza, subverted the notion of a personal God who rewards or punishes, replacing it with an immanent force, alive within nature itself. Such thinking dissolved the traditional hierarchy between man and the natural world. If God is in everything, then everything holds divine value. The stars, the rivers, the animals, even matter that appears inert. There is no separation between the sacred and the profane, between spirit and matter. Bruno saw the divine in all that exists, a spark of cosmic creativity shining through every aspect of reality. This vision not only contradicted Christian dogma, but also challenged the emerging science that sought to reduce nature to mechanisms and mechanical laws. While others tried to measure and dissect the world, Bruno understood it as a living organism, conscious in every part. His pantheism was also a philosophy of liberation. If divinity is present in everything, no one can claim authority over it. Not the church, not theologians, not kings, for truth is not centralized, but dispersed throughout the universe. For Bruno, wisdom was not a dogma revealed from on high, but a living process of discovery, present in all things. There is no single book that contains all truth, but infinite signs scattered across creation. This idea turned his thought into a radical threat. By denying the need for intermediaries between man and the divine, Bruno invalidated the role of priests and the very foundation of ecclesiastical power. To say that God is everywhere and nowhere at once was, at that time, the greatest of heresies. Another pillar of his philosophy was the coincidence of opposites. In an infinite universe, where all is a manifestation of divinity, there can be no absolute dualities. For Bruno, what seems opposed is actually complementary. All things arise from the same principle, manifesting in different forms. In his writings he affirms, "In the infinite, there is no difference between center and periphery, between large and small, high and low." With this, he challenged not only traditional cosmology, but the entire structure of thought that divides and ranks. This logic extended to moral categories themselves, good and evil, light and darkness, life and death. For Bruno, these pairs are not eternal enemies, but faces of a single unity. Conflict arises from limited perception. True wisdom lies in recognizing that opposites do not cancel each other. They complete each other. Evil is not the absence of good, but an expression of the whole in another form. Just as death is not the end, but a return to the beginning. Truth for Bruno is not found in the imposition of a single path, but in the ability to perceive the harmony within diversity. What we judge as contradictory appears so only because we observe from a narrow perspective. An expanded consciousness sees that all is part of the one. There is no separation. There is no end. Only continuous transformation in a universe where the divine breathes through everything. Giordano Bruno's philosophy was not merely cosmological, it was also ethical, existential, and radically liberating. By understanding that everything is interconnected and that no absolute opposites exist, he proposed a new worldview in which fanaticism, dogmatism, and punitive morality lost all meaning. To embrace the coincidence of opposites meant to challenge the core structure of religious thought at the time, a system sustained by absolute antagonisms, good and evil, God and the devil, heaven and hell. If everything originates from the same source, if all things partake in the same divine principle, then there is no room for eternal damnation or exclusive spiritual privileges. Bruno could not conceive of a God who punished or rewarded based on arbitrary rules. Divinity to him was not a judge with human will, but the living totality of existence, an infinite flow, without beginning or end. And if the universe is infinite, if all is contained within this same whole, then no dogma can claim to possess the one and only truth. The threat he posed to the church was not merely doctrinal, it was ontological. He dismantled the very foundations upon which religious power had been built. Bruno saw the human mind as a reflection of the infinite itself. Thought, he believed, should not be imprisoned by traditions, rigid rules, or structures of authority. The capacity to imagine, reflect, and transcend limitations was, in his view, the highest expression of divinity within the human being. In De Immenso et Innumerabilibus, he wrote, "Whoever conforms to what has been taught, without daring to go beyond, imprisons themselves." Knowledge was not a destination, but an unending journey, and every answer should give rise to new questions. This vision led him to develop innovative ideas on memory and imagination. Inspired by the Hermetic tradition and Renaissance mnemonic arts, Bruno believed the mind was plastic, capable of absorbing and reorganizing information in creative and limitless ways. Thought for him was not mere logical sequence. It was a living, transformative force capable of shaping reality itself. Imagination was not the opposite of reason, it was its most subtle extension. Through it, we could access dimensions of truth unreachable by rational methods alone. But the freedom he defended went beyond philosophy. It was a spiritual and political freedom. Why should anyone submit to institutions that dictate what can or cannot be thought? Bruno rejected all attempts to control thought because he knew that knowledge was the only legitimate path to truth. He rose up against a society that rewarded blind obedience and punished honest doubt. His rebellion was not only against the church, it was against every system that sought to suffocate the expansion of human consciousness. For this reason, Giordano Bruno should not be remembered merely as a victim of his time, but as a living challenge hurled at all times. He conceived the soul as a dynamic force, inseparable from the perpetual motion of the cosmos. In an infinite universe, where creation never began and will never end, the soul, like thought, is destined for eternal expansion. Bruno did not simply want to discover the universe. He wanted to become an active part of it. And for that, he paid the highest price one can pay for daring to think the unthinkable. For Giordano Bruno, the soul could not be confined to a single existence. Since his work Cause, Principle, and Unity, he had affirmed that nothing perishes, everything transforms. Reality knows no annihilation, only metamorphosis. With this vision, Bruno broke from the Christian doctrine of final judgment and eternal salvation, replacing it with a conception of existence as a cycle, a continuous flow of mutations where death is merely a transition, not an end. The transmigration of the soul, for him, was not a hollow religious belief, but a profound philosophical implication. Life was continuity, not rupture. There was no fixed destiny, no definitive rewards or punishments. Thus, morality could not be based on fear of hell, but on the responsibility each being carries within the cosmic whole. Each individual was part of a living, eternal, and interconnected current. We are not isolated fragments of the universe, but temporary expressions of the same substance, changing in form, but not in essence. This vision challenged not only Christianity, but also the mechanistic mentality beginning to dominate the science of his time. While others saw the universe as a machine composed of separate parts, Bruno saw it as a living organism, endowed with intelligence, consciousness, and profound unity. To him, there was no split between spirit and matter, between body and soul. All was the expression of a single energy in perpetual motion, eternally renewing itself. His philosophy, therefore, was not merely scientific, it was metaphysical. It dissolved the boundaries between the divine, the human, and the natural. Bruno did not separate man from nature, nor the creator from creation. Everything was interconnected in a vibrant web, where each element echoed all others. And within this context, he rescued and redefined the notion of magic. For Bruno, magic was not superstition, nor a dark art of manipulating hidden forces. It was rather an extension of reason, the deep knowledge of the laws that govern the universe. He wrote that true magic was the science of the hidden bonds that unite all things. It was not about incantations or spells, but about the human ability to influence reality through understanding the principles that sustain it. To him, nature was not a chaos to be feared, but an ordered system of symbolic relationships. Through intelligence and will, the human being could align with these forces and consciously participate in the universal dynamic. His conception of magic was deeply influenced by Renaissance Hermeticism and Neoplatonism, but Bruno took it further. He integrated it into his cosmology of the infinite, in which everything is in everything, and each part reflects the whole. By uniting science, philosophy, spirituality, and magic, Giordano Bruno proposed a silent revolution, not only in how we think, but in how we exist. A call to transcend the limits imposed by tradition, authority, and fear. He saw thought as a transformative force, and imagination as a bridge to the invisible. The soul, in this vision, was not a prisoner of the body, nor a hostage of final judgment, but an eternal traveler in the cosmic ocean of existence. And perhaps that is what most threatened the powers of his time, not merely what he thought, but what he made others dare to imagine. Giordano Bruno believed that thought held real power over matter. To him, the human mind, being a spark of the cosmic totality, could interact with the very structure of reality. Magic, in his philosophy, was not sorcery or illusion, but a science of transformation, a path to expand consciousness and attain greater mastery over the self and the world. To know the nature of things was, at the same time, to understand their power. There were no miracles, nor supernatural forces, only universal laws too subtle, too unknown for most to perceive. This magical, rational, and symbolic vision directly threatened religious authority. If the universe was not subject to the arbitrary will of a transcendent God, but instead governed by laws that the human mind could understand and eventually manipulate, then power no longer belonged to priests or sacred scriptures, but to those who dared to investigate and unveil the mysteries of the cosmos. For Bruno, the true magician was, above all, a philosopher, someone who did not passively accept reality, but revealed its hidden essence. In an age when knowledge was surveilled, restricted, and punished, this proposition was explosive. Knowledge ceased to be an institutional privilege and became a liberating force, and that perhaps was his most unforgivable sin. To affirm that the sacred is not above, but within, and that the mind, when aligned with the laws of the universe, is capable of touching the infinite itself. Giordano Bruno died as he lived, without submission. For 8 years in prison, the Inquisition tried to break him, demanding that he renounce his worldview, his philosophy, his courage to defy the established order. But Bruno refused to betray his conscience. "I do not repent, nor would I change my ideas out of fear," he told his judges. He did not seek martyrdom or glory. He simply could not deny what, for him, was truth. His fate was sealed in February 1600. Taken to Campo de' Fiori in Rome, he was burned alive. An iron spike was placed in his mouth so that his final words could not be heard, as if silence by fire could extinguish a mind already ablaze. His books were banned, his name erased for centuries. But the fire did not consume his idea. It kept burning in other minds in other ages, in all those who refused to accept the boundaries imposed by dogma. His vision of an infinite universe echoes today in modern cosmology. His concept of an immanent divine influenced thinkers like Spinoza, and his battle for freedom of thought became a banner for all who understand that to think is, in itself, an act of rebellion. Bruno was not just a philosopher. He was a spiritual insurgent, a soul who understood that truth does not bow to power. Today, a statue of him still stands in the very place where he was executed, his face shrouded by a cloak, his gaze cast downward, as if still watching in silence those who believe they can control human thought. His death was not in vain, not because he was understood in his time, but because his very existence revealed something greater than fear, the will to think for oneself. Giordano Bruno believed the universe was infinite, but he also believed that the human mind could follow it, if only it dared to break its own chains. And perhaps that is his greatest legacy. If this video made you reflect, subscribe to the channel to keep exploring ideas that challenge convention and expand the limits of consciousness. Until our next inner odyssey, or perhaps right now, by clicking on the screen. See you there.